Wendell Potter joins us today for the hour. Up until last year, he was the head of corporate communications at CIGNA, one of the nation's largest for-profit health insurance companies. He served as CIGNA's chief corporate spokesperson. He also once headed communications at Humana, another large for-profit health insurer. In 2007, Wendell Potter helped spearhead the healthcare industry's campaign against Michael Moore's movie Sicko. What turned you? Why did you change?
I changed because over the last 2 or 3 years, I began seeing more than I'd ever seen before, and became more knowledgeable of how health insurance companies make money, how they maximize profits. The companies that I worked for were two of the biggest for-profit health insurance companies. And over the past 15 years, since the last time we had this debate, the health insurance industry has consolidated to the point that now there are about 7 very large for-profit health insurance companies that dominate the market. They have begun shifting their business model away from managed care, which frankly I used to think was a great model, a great concept for the delivery of health care. But they're moving away from that to what they refer to as consumer-driven or consumer-directed care. And it really is just a euphemism for shifting the financial burden from insurers and employers onto the shoulders of working men and women. I saw that happening, but I also saw how the things that they do to maximize their profit, which really boils down to dumping the sick.
What do you mean, dumping the sick?
2 different ways that they do this. In the individual insurance market, we've seen quite a bit of news coverage, especially in California, when insurance companies who are active in the individual market, and this means when you don't get your insurance coverage through your workplace, about the only option you have is to buy it directly from an insurance company, and usually it's much more costly than it is if you buy it or get it through your employer. Once you file a claim, if you are unfortunate enough to get very sick or have an accident and file a claim, you very often will find that your insurance company will go back and look at your application to see if there might be a chance that you either didn't disclose something that you knew about in the past, or inadvertently didn't disclose something, or might not have known about a pre-existing condition. They'll use that as evidence that you were committing fraud, and they'll revoke your policy, or they call it rescinding your policy, leaving you holding the bag, making you completely responsible for all the medical bills. That's one way that they dump people who need insurance the most. Another is if you are employed, particularly with a small business, and your employer gets his or her insurance through one of the large insurers, and if just one person in your company files a claim that the underwriters think is too high, if it skews what they think is the appropriate medical experience or claim experience, when that business comes up for renewal, they very likely will jack up the rates so much that your employer has no alternative but to leave and leave you and all of your co-workers without insurance. Either that, or they may cut benefits or try to shop for coverage somewhere else. But the end result is you may find yourself dumped into the roles and the ranks of the uninsured.
Was there a seminal moment when you're head of communications at CIGNA that really made you start to look? And how were you isolated there from, well, most people in the country, who were increasingly talking about the massive problems of health care and access to it and cutting off the dumping of the sick, as you put it?
I was very isolated, along with most insurance company executives who deal with numbers all the time, profit margins and medical loss ratios and earnings per share and how many millions of members you have, or things like that. They're just numbers. And I didn't really associate that with real people as much as I should, and as much as most insurance company executives should, until I went to visit my relatives in Tennessee. And while I was there, I happened to learn about a healthcare expedition that was being held at a nearby town across the state line in Virginia. And I was intrigued, borrowed my dad's car and drove up to Wise County, to see what was going on there. And this expedition was being held at the Wise County Fairgrounds, and it was being put on by this group called Remote Area Medical that got its start several years ago, taking volunteer doctors from this country to remote villages in South America where people really don't have any access to medical care. The founder realized pretty soon, though, that the need in this country is very, very great. And he started holding similar expeditions in rural communities throughout the country. And this one was nearby. I decided to check it out. I didn't have any idea what to expect, but when I walked through the fairground gates, it was just absolutely overwhelming. What I saw were people who were lined up. It was raining that day. They were lined up in the rain by the hundreds, waiting to get care that was being donated by doctors and nurses and dentists and other caregivers. And they were being treated in animal stalls. Volunteers had come to disinfect the animal stalls. They also had set up tents. It looked like a MASH unit. It looked like this could have been something that was happening in a war-torn country, and war refugees were there to get their care. It was just unbelievable, and it just drove it home to me, maybe for the first time, that we were talking about real human beings and not just numbers.
And so what did you do with that?
Well, it took me a while to just really process it. I came back to work. I knew at that time that I couldn't continue doing what I was doing. It just didn't seem like it was ethically the right thing for me to do. You know, I had mortgage payments, I had other bills to pay, and it was just, it was difficult to work through this and figure out, well, what do I do and what do I do next? But then, you know, just 2 or 3 weeks later, I was having to fly to a meeting, and I often would fly on one of the corporate jets. And while I was doing that, I was served my lunch on a gold rim plate. Was given gold-plated flatware to eat my lunch. I was sitting in a very spacious and luxurious leather chair. And it just dawned on me for the first time. I'd done this many times, but because of the Wise County experience, I just realized for the first time that someone's premiums were helping me to travel that way and were paying for my lunch on gold-trimmed china. And then I thought about those men and women that I had seen in Wise County, undoubtedly not having any idea that this is the way that insurance executives lived, and how premium dollars were being spent. And that got me closer to making an ultimate decision that I had to leave.
Can you think of an example of when you told a reporter something that you felt was not true and that reporter did not investigate further?
2 or 3 things. I think insurance companies and well, anyone can. One of my favorite textbooks when I was in college was How to Lie with Statistics.